As mentioned, I'm Erin, and I am your Member Services and Solutions Manager. And with me is Jessica, who is your Trade Show and Events Manager. She will take over after Rick and John are done handling all of your questions. Just a few housekeeping items. Everyone is muted, so if you have any questions, please use the chat icon at the bottom of your screen to type in any questions during the webinar. Both myself and Jess will monitor the questions. And then finally, the slides will be sent out and also be posted on our website. So who is presenting today's webinar? Well, that would be Rick Reed and from the Manitoba Branch Association, and also John Burke from the Alberta Branch Association. Supply Chain is the leading and largest association representing supply chain management professionals, setting the standard of excellence for professional skills, knowledge, and integrity. Representing nearly 6,500 members working across the private and public sectors, Supply Chain Canada is a principal source of supply chain training, education, and professional development in the country. Through its 10 provincial and territorial institutes, Supply Chain Canada grants the supply chain management profession, the SCMP designation, the highest achievement in the field and mark of strategic supply chain leadership. Rick Reed has over 20 years of supply chain management experience working in both a private and public sector. Prior to becoming ED of the Manitoba Institute, Rick served as president of the Supply Chain of Canada, Manitoba, as well as 2 terms as director of the Supply Chain Canada National Board of Directors as the chair of the SCMA Federation Council. Rick has held the position of Executive Director of Supply Chain Canada Manitoba Institute for 6 years and specializes in helping organizations optimize their supply chains by developing strategies to maximize efficiency, reliability, and profitability. He has contributed to the success of these organizations by helping to eliminate waste, mitigate risk, and reduce the cost. All right, Rick, so that is all I have. Do you want to take it from here and tell us all about supply chain?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Erin and Jessica for having me come chat with you today. It's kind of nice as we got talking to them. I come from your industry. I grew up in a lumberyard. My father worked for Revelstoke when they were still around, and Beaver Lumber when they were still around. And then when we were going to be moved to Wetaskiwin, chose to open his own yard in Brandon, Manitoba, rather than have the family move again. So, you know, all through my early teen years and through that, I grew up in the family business, doing everything from selling and buying and outside in the winter loading 2x4s. So I'm quite familiar with the challenges that many of you guys have, and you know, within the industry and within just doing business. Supply chain management is something that it's been around for many, many years, but not a lot of people really think of it as a discipline that they should be focusing on within their industry or within their business. And that's partly what I'm hoping to help you guys with, you know, today. So what is it? Let me just get on, there we go. So what is supply chain management? And just like the slide says, it's a process. The difference is it's a process that, you know, extends outside of the 4 walls of your business. It involves everything, the planning and management, as it says, of resources, processes, risks, information, and relationships from point of origin to the point of consumption. So that's everything from, you know, that guy who's cutting down that tree in British Columbia, you know, initially, from there to that customer actually using it to, you know, build that house in Manitoba. So everything that's involved in those things, all those processes, all those steps, all those handoffs are part of what supply chain management is about. And the better you do it, the more competitive your business will be. And essentially, supply chain management, and a lot of people don't look at it this way. They call it, sometimes it's called operations, sometimes it's not even called anything, but it's how your organizations deliver your goods and services to your customers. Because you can go sell anything you want, but if you can't get it, right, to that customer, then it doesn't matter. If you can't get, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, if you can't get the right product in the right place, then, you're not going to be successful. And again, this is very high level, but I wanted to point this out and this is when I talk about the chain, is that you have and you can see yourself in blue, and you have your immediate suppliers, then you have their suppliers, and then you have your suppliers' suppliers. And then the other way could be customers. And in your industry, you might sell direct to the customer, you might sell to a contractor who sells to the customer. All of those people are part of your supply chain. And how you interact with them, both upstream and downstream, is going to determine, one, how competitive your business is, how profitable you can be, and how much you have the opportunity to grow that business. On this slide, probably the most important thing to keep in mind on this slide, though, is the very top item. And it talks about information. Now, information is critical in managing a supply chain effectively. You need to understand from the customer point of view, you need to know what's coming up that way in regards to demand and what they're going to do and what their expectations are. But you also need to know from the other side as to, okay, where is there scarcity? Where am I having challenges getting product? Where is a risk coming? Where is a new product coming that's going to disrupt, the way I'm doing business? So you need to have the information come that tells you a little bit about the future and challenges and risks. And the other side, you need to have that where it comes up to demand and expectations. And somewhere in there, you need to develop a strategy that meets the expectations while taking into account the risks to build your, grow your business and find a way to be more profitable. Supply chain management is really about, I've always said it's really been about four things, but I've added another one because of the nature of where our world is going. The environment in which we're working is changing. But basically, the four things that we've always done is we find it, we buy it, we move it, and we warehouse it. And that's been the same ever since we got started. I mean, I remember I took a trip, one of my first buying trips, I was in China, and I went to the city of Nanjing, which is the former capital of the first Ming dynasty. And while I was there, a supplier took me to something called the Shanghua Gate. And really, this thing is like a huge castle in many ways. It's a huge stone castle that has the gate to the city in it. And the only reason I mention it is this thing was built in the 13th or 14th century. But the interesting thing about it that I thought was neat was when you looked at the bricks that made up this castle. Every one of those bricks had engraved in it, it was made with it, a whole bunch of Chinese characters. And when I asked about it, and there's writing all over, when I asked the person that was guiding us around about what it was, they said, well, it was part of their supply chain. That brick, every one of those bricks had the characters on them that told you where the brick came from throughout China, who made it, who the supervisor was, and basically who the dispatcher was. And this was in every one of those bricks in China, in 1300. So supply chain has always been around. The fifth thing that I talk about, and I call it green it because I don't have a better word for it yet. I haven't had an epiphany on what to call it. But this is coming into that more sustainability, the environment side. And the reason that I put that in there is not to say, to try to turn you on to tree huggers, but you need to recognize that one of the risks that's coming down the pipe to your businesses is going to be environment. Politicians are always looking for new ways to raise money. And the easy one right now where they're going to get less pushback is going to be on taxing pollution. And the carbon tax you see is just the start of what's going to start happening as governments start to penalize people who don't make sustainable or environmentally friendly choices in their supply chain practices. When I worked for one organization, we did business in the province of Ontario, and they came up with what was called a stewardship program. And what we had to do every year is we had to do an estimate of all the garbage and stuff that we produced in Ontario that went into one of their landfills. And based on that estimate, they charged us a fee. Well, the first year was easy. It was $500 and some odd. The problem was the government, all of a sudden realizing this could be a real cash cow, changed the rates. And the second year, it was about $6,000. So what it did from my side was it changed how I had products packaged and what sent to us. We stopped giving products out in plastic bags because they would be counted in there. We stopped having lenses shipped in cardboard boxes because it would end up in there. We stopped, producing paper. We tried to go more paperless than that. And those are steps that we started to take in order to reduce our expense on what the government was going to charge us for not being environmentally responsible. And that is something we'll talk about a little later, but it's something that's coming. But that's why I put it on here that, it's one of the fifth thing that, supply chain management looks after. In essence, what I said that, it's how your organization delivers its goods and services. This is just an extension of that statement, and it really kind of nails it right on the head. This is what our goal is. It's simply exactly to have the right product with the right quality in the right place at the right time at the right price, in the right quantities. And you guys should know, anybody who's in a retail lumber business, I've been there, there's nothing that sucks when you're going out there and the guy's asking for 16-foot 2x4s and all you got is the 14-footers left from the last truck that you bought. And you're going, well, geez, do I have to go give him something else? Or he wants studs and all you have left is 8-footers or 10-footers that you have to either give them and they charge you for cutting them down, or you have to discount them because they're going to have to do some extra work. This is what it's all about. And if you can do this, right, you'll be successful. And the reason why, and we're going to get to it, when I talk about the right place, is it's all about competitive advantage. Characteristics, and just to touch on it before I got to there, it's characteristics of what many would consider world-class supply chain management. These are some of them. One, strong cost management. You're always looking at those dollars and cents. You're always trying to maximize the value for what you're spending. And it's key because sometimes you just spend more, but it's about what other value you can take from that agreement. You're going to be resilient. And resilient, when I say that, is based on, and you guys have probably run into this, but probably the best example is everybody's aware of, the great toilet paper mass buying that happened at the beginning of COVID. And it took, a long time for many of those retail stores and that to be able to get the product back on the shelves. A few show up and be gone 10 minutes later. And that's really about resilience. Resilience is how good is your organization at recovering from an unexpected event. So it could be a situation where all of a sudden demand from toilet paper goes through the roof. It could be the demand for, in your case, maybe treated lumber goes through the roof, because everybody stayed at home and they decided to build decks and fences over COVID. But the question is, how quick can your organization go from this level to this level, right? And how quickly can you also adjust and make sure that you can supply the demand at the new level? Is it a long time or is it a short time? And the shorter the time you can recover, it takes for you to recover and adjust to the new demand, either up or down, because the bottom can fall out, same thing. How quickly you can adjust to the new demand is the measurement of how resilient your organization is. I find that world-class supply chains are learning organizations. They're very good at taking information and figuring out what it means in terms of risk and opportunities and challenges and being able to learn from that and adapt quickly. Effective information flow, both up and downstream. Having a situational awareness of what's going on within your market so that you know when to jump and when to hold back, when to buy and when to buy less and buy often. And you only can do that if you have a good way of collecting and analyzing information flow, both up and downstream. They're very efficient and lean, not a lot of waste, not a lot of extra steps. When you can automate it, you automate it. When you have to do it because there's no value add to it, but you have to do it, you find a way to do it as quickly as possible so you don't invest a lot of labor dollars into it. But there's always a focus on trying to eliminate inefficiency within your process. They're very integrated, highly integrated with their customers, with their key customers and their key suppliers. You don't have a lot of, we're an island and we're going to keep them at arm's length. You're making those relationships with those key suppliers that are critical to the success of your business. And you're doing the same with those key customers that drive those 20% of customers that drive 80% of your business. You're trying to make sure that you're integrated with them to eliminate waste and cost and to make sure that, they stay, because the more integrated they are with you, the harder it is for them to pick up and go somewhere else. Scalable is another one. And this kind of goes to the resilience, is how good are you at being able to scale up when necessary or scale down when necessary? Are you stuck where you can only produce X number of units a day, or basically you have all these people and it's reliant on doing X number of sales per day? Or are you scalable where you can adjust accordingly to meet whatever happen demand you get? And risk is managed very effectively. It's identified often, it's identified early, and steps are taken to either change your process or other steps to mitigate that risk for your organization. But as I said, when you come back to this right here, when you say this is the whole point of supply chain management, if you can do this faster, cheaper, and more consistently than your competitor, you have a competitive advantage. And that's the goal. You guys right now, many of you, whether directly or indirectly in your industry, are facing pressures from lots of different places right now. You might be a small town lumberyard, or you might be a small regional lumberyard, for example, and you've done well within your marketing area. But the challenge is that as years have gone on, and it's easy for people to pick up, you're an hour away from a major center, and all of a sudden, well, you know what, it seems a little more expensive to buy that here. I'm going into, whatever, Brandon or Calgary or something. I'm going there anyway, so I'm going to stop by the Home Depot, or I'm going to stop by the Lowe's. Or if you're a store that has housewares, that sort of thing, like a Home Hardware, for example, all of a sudden, well, I think I'll go to Walmart. So you already have that challenge where you have people within your own market area going somewhere else because they have a perception that the value is better or the price is better. So that's already eating into your sales, and it's causing you to have to take steps like maybe cut margins to be more competitive, offer more deals. But cutting margin only works so long. You only go so much before you're out of business, or you're not going anywhere. If you're not growing, you're dying. The other challenge is we're in an Amazon world now. So some products that you guys probably sell, it's very easy for somebody to get on the computer or get on their tablet when they're sitting in front of the TV at night and go bing, bang, boom. They order it, and then it shows up on the doorstep, the next day or the day after. And you're competing against that. And they have that less overhead and those sort of things. So what do you do there? So what you need to do is, when we're talking about this, and I'm getting a little away from supply chain nuts and bolts into strategy, but that's part of the issue. That's part of what I'm trying to say is, your supply chain has to be part of your overall corporate strategy. It has to be built in. What do you want to achieve? And what's my supply chain strategy? And how am I going to execute in a way that allows me to achieve the corporate strategy? How am I going to grow business? How am I going to keep my customers? How am I going to do it in a way that I can actually make money and not give away all my margin? And that's why supply chain is critical, because that's how you do it. And as I said, the more you can be consistent, and you can be fast, and you can have the right price, and you can make sure you hit all those 6 or 7 R's, right place, right time, right quantity, etc., the more you can actually deliver value to your customers. As I said, and it is kind of just a take on the world-class side of things, is how does it create competitive advantage? Well, if you can deliver, if you can do the right place, right time, all those R's, if you can do that faster, better, and more, less expensive than your competitors, you're generally going to be more efficient, because you can't do it without being efficient. You're going to increase sales because you're going to have a better in-stock position at the right price in the right place so that you can sell it to that customer when need be. You're going to have increased resilience. You're going to be able to adjust to increases or decreases in your demand because your system's going to be nimble. Your supply chain is going to be nimble that can handle that. You're going to have a better ROI. You're going to be able to do more with less. Your risk is going to be reduced because you're aware of it earlier and you can take steps proactively to deal with it rather than react to it when it hits you. Your cash flow is going to be better because you're going to have optimized inventory. You're not going to have everything. You're going to have the things that you can sell that meets demand that you can make money on. You're going to have, and this kind of goes to resilience and that and efficiency, you're going to have flexibility. You're going to be able to pivot when you see an opportunity come. And all this, when you start reducing costs, eliminating risks, better in-stock positions at the right price, and you have the quantities needed, you're going to be able to make more money because you're going to be able to increase your sales and you're going to be able to, make the margins you need because you've eliminated the costs, which means that you increase your profitability by keeping the prices the same, but reducing your cost. And I'm going to give you some examples of how that works for you a little bit later on. Another reason why you should care is exactly this: satisfied customers. Satisfied customers are return customers, and everybody knows the story that it's a lot harder to find a new customer than it is to keep an old one. Your supply chain is the key to how you satisfy those customers. If you can deliver that product when they need it, when they want it, meet or exceed expectations, they're going to come back, even if it costs a little bit more. I have somebody in my own office right now that's been waiting since May to get a refrigerator. And this is on her, and she's on her second supplier. She was on the first one that, they weren't going. So she went and canceled the order, got from the other one, thought she was going to get it. Oh yeah, we got them in Calgary. And that was about a month ago. And all of a sudden couldn't get that one. And now she has to wait till sometime in October to get it. That's not helping how customers view you. If you're able to deliver that, in this environment, everybody says appliances are hard to get, you're going to get a customer for life, or you're going to have a customer that's less likely to go somewhere else because you looked after them. Your supply chain not only met their demands, but probably exceeded them. And supply chains directly impact how customers feel about your organization. Nothing I hate more than going to a store when I see something on sale and I show up and the shelf's already empty because they only had 3 or 4 of them, right? That gives you a negative, feeling of that organization going, well, yeah, then they just conned me. They had a couple, 3 of them, and now they're going to try to sell me the thing that's $100 more. Probably the best example of this is why you should care. And I'll look at this and I'll give this to you. Everybody's familiar with Target stores. Target in the States is very successful. I don't know, I imagine it's the same right across the West, but here in Winnipeg, what a lot of people like to do is they like to go down, head across the border to the city of Grand Forks, which is about an hour and a half away from here. And, and they would go down, and one of the reasons they go down is so they can go to the Super Target store. And they went there because they liked the great big selection, big store, lots of selection, full shelves, nice and clean, great prices. So then when Target announced that they were coming to Canada, there was a lot of people pretty excited about it, saying, well, I don't have to go all the time. I could just go down to this. And they built some beautiful stores here. And what happened was they failed. They failed miserably, failed so much that they withdrew from Canada. But I can tell you right now, the reason they failed was because their supply chain failed. Because all those things that people that saw and they got when they went to Grand Forks, right? Full shelves, great prices, great selection. That's what their expectation was. And then what happened when you went to the stores here, you found empty shelves, higher prices, and stuff all over the place. So what the supply chain delivered for Target didn't come close to the expectations of the customer, and it killed them. And they left, and it was a very expensive lesson for them to pay for. So this is part of the reason why you should care too. How well your supply chain works directly impacts how people view your business. Satisfy your customers, as I said, the expectations. It allows you to keep prices same or lower, faster deliveries, better in-stock positions, predictability, knowing that they can go down and you're not going to surprise them with something. Better quality and value, because if your supply chain is focusing on getting better value, people will pay a little more for it. Exceeding expectations. If your supply chain can, is world-class and doing well, you can deliver on these things for your customers. So that's why it's great. Now the question is, there's challenges, and there's lots of challenges we're all facing. Economic uncertainty right now is one big one. We have a situation with COVID And we have people that are uncertain about their jobs and their money situation. When can we get back to normal? What's new normal look like if we can't get back to what it was? There's a lot of economic uncertainty. Governments are spending money like crazy. At some point, maybe that stops. So what impact does that have? So you need to operate in that environment. And I know that it's pretty challenging for everybody. Climate change is another one. Climate change is going to impact, a lot of what's going on in the world in terms of raw materials. And climate change, if you have a fundamental change in growing seasons, and the type of trees, for example, that can grow in Canada, what does that do? What happens if you harvest trees and you replant the new ones, and all of a sudden the global warming or the climate change, everything that's happening, isn't conducive to that particular species of tree growing in that region anymore? What do you do, right? What do you replace it with? Like, what are you going to go with? Is it more expensive or less expensive? Is the quality the same? Lots of questions. And that's just not on timber. It could be on anything else, any other raw material that comes into the products that you guys sell. Material shortages. I am aware that dimensional lumber and particularly treated lumber is a big challenge for the lumber industry right now. There's not a lot of it around, and it's been really a fight to try to find some. Trade disruptions. Our friend to the south likes his tariffs, but what happens there when all of a sudden arbitrarily, the United States slaps on tariffs on particular products, and they still won't honor the softwood lumber deal that they keep taxing everybody on. The trade disruptions are very real in this world where you have a lot of people competing and retaliating right now. Competition, I talked about. Disruptive technologies, and that could be everything from artificial intelligence. It could be blockchains, could be drone deliveries, could be driverless vehicles. All these things are part of it. Could be circular economy and some of the technologies that are coming in around that. What is it going to do about how you do business? And if one of your competitors incorporates something that gives them an advantage in a cost or risk point of view, then you're kind of in a situation where you need to probably respond, or else you're going to be at a disadvantage. Like for an example, at Suncor out in Alberta, Suncor ran a test on dump trucks at their oil sands plant, one of their oil sands projects, and they had 7 of them, and these huge dump trucks that move the sand to the processing plant. And it worked so well that they bought 50 more to incorporate them. And basically these trucks are driverless. And it saved them right off the bat, just for the operator alone, about $200,000 on average for each of those trucks. But what they also found out is each of those trucks, the driverless vehicle saved them anywhere from 10 to 15% on tire wear, maintenance, and fuel. So the driverless vehicle was better than a human driver on those additional operating costs. So if somebody starts incorporating something like that into their business and puts you at a disadvantage, how do you respond? So that is a challenge and how do you have the money to respond? Regulatory environments, that comes down to how they're going to start, we talked about it, how they're going to start taxing pollution. But most importantly, and I highlighted it, is it's what you don't know. And that's in my 20 some odd years doing supply chain for a number of different organizations. The thing that usually hurt us the most was what I didn't know, which is why I invested so much time in market intelligence, information gathering, analysis, making sure that I was always talking to people that, could be those leading indicators, the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, so that I could be ahead of the curve rather than reacting to it as it hits me at the last minute. Understanding customer demand is another challenge. Is what does demand look like? And nowadays, with social media and everything else is happening, and influencers and all these things are happening, it's changing quite a bit. Statistically, some things stay very much the same, but there's also other factors that are coming in, to the mix that change rapidly. The question is, how do you understand what customer demand is? And for you to grow your business, it can't just be in your traditional trading area. It's how do you actually draw people in? How do you draw dollars in from outside what's your traditional trading area? And what are they looking for? And not only do you have to understand demand, but then you have to create a supply chain, a structure that can either meet or exceed those expectations that those customers have. And that's harder than it sounds because it takes a lot of work and it's continuous. But the first step is getting on that path and striving for that, and you will see benefits. Managing scarcity, supply assurance is critical, and it's the same in your business. You know, being able to have those windows arrive, you know, from Geldwin or Lowen or All Weather, wherever it happens to be, have that arrive on time so it can be to the site when that contractor needs it, right, is critical to not getting charged back for their guys standing around looking at you funny. I had challenges when I was with McDermott Lumber. They were a regional yard here. And our challenge, my biggest challenges were with things, something as simple as weeping tile and void form. You know, making sure that I had that in the right place at the right time so that we didn't get charged back by contractors. And lumber right now, I know, is an issue. Circular economy is another one. As I said, governments are going to start taxing. In the next few years, you're going to start getting taxed on the waste or the outputs from your processes. The question is, how do you minimize your outputs? How do you minimize that waste from what you're doing, right? How do you take something as simple as the metal banding that you have and make sure it gets recycled so it doesn't go into a landfill? But how do you take outputs from what you're doing and how do you put them back, you know, through a reverse process that turns them from outputs or waste into an input into the process again? And there's an opportunity for recovery on that, you know, where you can actually recover some of the dollars you invested, you know, to get some money coming back in where it becomes a revenue center rather than a cost center. Other challenges, and this is about being a learning organization that I talked about, is how do you change your organization to be able to learn faster and adapt quicker to what's going on? And that's part of what you need to do. You need to be able to look at what's happening, understand what's happening, either root cause the problem or recognize the opportunity, and then adapt your supply chain as quickly as possible to be able to either mitigate the damage or take advantage of the opportunity. It's that understanding and incorporating emerging and disruptive technologies, efficiencies, integration. These are challenges that people have a lot with. Integration generally because of trust. People don't like sharing information, especially some of the smaller, you know, small, medium-sized enterprises that a lot of you guys fall into. The idea of sharing information with your suppliers is not something that comes easy. But the most successful people that do that, I'm not saying share with all of them, but those handful of really key people that drive your success, integrating more and sharing the right information with them will help them make better decisions that in the end will reduce your costs and reduce your waste, your risk, sorry. And efficiency, I put batch of one in just to give you an idea, is sometimes what happens in a lot of organizations, they build a process to produce X number of things. So it might be trusses and they build them in batches, or they might do, you know, different things to do, you know, large batches or a continuous manufacture if they're doing something like cabinets or whatever. But what a lot of supply chains try to do now is they're trying to minimize the need to be able to do large production runs of stuff or buy large quantities. Nike and Reebok and all the shoe companies, they used to be produced in the States. And then it got too much for the people to sew them. The labor rate got too high for them to sew them in the States. So they sent them to low cost labor countries to do the sewing there in Bangladesh and Vietnam, et cetera. But the problem what's happened now is the cost of being able to produce, you know, the batches of those shoes and the cost for the labor is starting to go up. It's not as efficient anymore. And so with those shoes, what they've done is they've introduced technologies that allow them now, much like a Dell computer, where an individual can go onto the system, they go on the internet, and they can pick all the features of the shoe, everything from the sole to the color to the look to the everything. And Nike has the ability to produce one pair of shoes specifically for you. And that one person can operate multiple machines and they can produce those orders quickly. And it's the batch of one philosophy. I'm not saying that you guys, it's necessarily a batch of one's going to work, but the idea of being able to, you know, get little, you know, buy little, buy often, so to speak, without sacrificing your price, you know, is something that allows you to be more scalable and allow you to pivot, and it minimizes the risk you have to having a lot of inventory lying around. The reason I put on this is And I didn't go to a lumber yard. I didn't want to do something and risk that somebody recognized whose yard it was, that it was somebody they knew. But I went to just one of the local yards here in a different industry, and I took some pictures. And this, and I've seen lumber yards that look like this quite often, where you have stuff kicking around. And the reason I wanted to put this in is, as you can see, there's kind of stuff everywhere, but where you guys might see junky, I see serious challenges with their supply chain. I see a problem with inventory management. I see a problem with forecasting. I see a problem with buying. I see a problem with lot sizes. I see a problem with, no recovery plan. What's going on? There is, like, if I were still in the business, this is the type of place that I would want to go work for. If we're in a supply chain role, simply for the fact that there is a whole lot of money sitting there waiting to be scooped up. Like the low-hanging fruit that's in this business, that's in that supply chain, that they're passing on to their customers, right, is immense. Just looking at this, just on the things that I see and based on my history. So the question I ask you guys is, and I'm not asking anybody to respond, but if your yard has piles like this, right? If it has a back room in a warehouse that looks like this, or if it has a corner of the yard that has this stuff, then I'm telling you that there are some opportunities within your supply chain that you can not only reduce your cost, but you can be more competitive, and you make it a lot nicer to work in there, and it's a lot easier to produce goods quickly and efficiently. So what do you need to do to improve? And this is just high level stuff. It starts by having competent, trained supply chain people looking after that role within your organization. And one thing I've noticed in many small, medium-sized enterprises, not all just in the lumber industry, but any small, medium enterprise, is it's often something that just handled either on a part-time basis or handled by, the owner or the president. Because they started that business, they were all things at one time. They were the buyer, they were the salesperson, they were the finance guy, they were the janitor, they were the loader in the back. And what happened was, as they got bigger, they said, well, I need somebody to do finance because there has to be audits, and I should have somebody that understands finance to do that. I'm gonna take care of the strategy, but I need somebody to really go and push sales. So I'm gonna hire somebody that's really good at sales. But what they don't do is they don't go turn around and say, my supply chain, really needs to be competitive. It needs to do more for me, but I'm going to go get somebody that really understands it to go do it. And even when there is some people, and I know there's buyers on right now, one thing they forget to do often is give the authority to those people to be able to go do their job effectively, which is really key. So that's the first thing. Having competent people, have them trained, because just because you've been in it, doesn't mean that you're necessarily getting the most out of what you can do, because there are some techniques and stuff that you can learn by getting training that will certainly help you get better results. You need to understand your customer, find better ways to understand what demand is and how it's changing, and how do you put yourself ahead of the curve so you can respond quicker. Make sure that you develop a supply chain strategy that's actually compatible with your corporate strategy. If I'm working for a company that's all about cost and being a low cost provider, the last thing my supply chain strategy should be is go out and buy the most expensive thing around. Because, hey, look at the great value. Well, that's not what the strategy is. The strategy is to be a low cost provider, not providing the best quality. So you need to make sure that the two of them are in sync, and often they aren't. Make it visible. That's another one. You must make the process visible to truly understand the current state and where your costs are. Evaluate that process, understand which steps add value and which ones don't. And the best way to determine whether it adds value or whether it doesn't is ask yourself a question: would my customer want to pay for this? And if the answer is no, I don't think they'd want to pay for it, then either stop doing it or find a way to do it as quickly as possible with the least amount of effort. Focus on your core competency. You can't dance at all the weddings. Like, you can't do everything. And a lot of people try to, regardless of what industry. But the fact is, 20% of your customers make up 80% of your business. And if you're optimize the supply chain to make sure that 20% of those customers are taken care of, and that you can maximize your profitability and reduce your costs on those people, and you can actually do that better than everybody else, your business is going to be successful, because the other 80% that makes up 20%, you just grab what makes sense. And the example I give you is here when I talk about core competency is, Labatt's a good brewing company. They're not a distillery. So that's why you don't see Labatt's going and, distilling whiskey. So focus on what you're good at. And I'll use the example from my father's business. When he started in Brandon, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lumber yards in a city of about 45,000 people. And we were the 7th. And you had 6 lumber yards all going after the same business, right? They were all going after the contractors. They're all going after the new home sales. They're all going after the decks and fences. And what my father did, he took a different direction. He says, I can either, go in that same thing and do the same as them and try to compete, or I can do something different and develop a better core competency. And we focused on farm business. So we focused on farmers and Hutterites, and we focused on that business pretty much exclusively for the first few years. And so everything we did was about how do we satisfy or exceed those, farmers and Hutterites. How do we satisfy their expectations? How do we meet their needs better than everybody else? And it allowed, that business to grow within 5 years to be, we were doing $6 million after 5 years or something like that. And that's back in the early 80s. So focus on your core competency. What are you good at? And if you're not good at it, how do you bring partners into the mix that are better at it than you, that you can partner with, you can integrate with to satisfy that need? Because if something has to go, you want to make sure you keep your core competency that allows you to be successful in the worst times. And that goes back to scalability. Integrate and share information internally and externally. Communicate. Always be talking, always be engaged, and measure your performance relentlessly. Always understand what's going on and where you're doing well and where you're not. And then if you're not doing well, be able to root cause it and take steps to mitigate it or correct it so that you can, bring that profitability back up. Results. So I've been yammering on a lot about what you should do and why is it important. So I wanted to talk a little bit about results and why, just to give you a little more dollars and cents. When I was, one of the things that I was hired to do, I was hired by an optical company. I don't know if any of you guys see, we used to have them all through the West. It was Shoppers Optical Stores. And before the company was sold to Luxottica and all became Pearl Visions, King Optical Group had 75 stores across the country with 30 facilities making eyeglasses. And when I started there, they created the role. Their inventory was $9.2 million worth of junk. Lots of $15 frames, a lot of dollar lenses, cases for, a few bucks here and there. Like we had lots of pieces that made up that. And a lot of it was obsolete because their buying patterns said they just kept buying bulk and buying lots because it was a good price. And they didn't really look at demand. And what happened was it ended up with a bunch of dead stock so we had a bunch of money tied up in, dead stock and obsolete items that weren't going to sell. And so what we did was over that 18 months, my team was able to take that $9.2 million down to 4.9. So right off the bat, you go that there's $4 million worth of cash back into the business. We did that through a bunch of recovery efforts and other things that happened. My guys, when we processed our orders, it took 5 people all day to process all the orders because everything was done individually. So we would do somebody would go sell a pair of glasses, they put the order in, my guys would place the order for the suppliers. And the process was very manual and a lot of paper. Like they would have the order, they would have to do the sale. It would get key punched at the store, wherever it happened to be. It would come off, print it off at my guys. My guys would separate it into piles by region. They would take it, they would key punch the orders, they would print the orders, they would fax the orders, they'd wait for confirmation, then they'd match the confirmation to the orders, and then they'd go file them. So 40 man hours, per day, just to do this, just to process 500-600 orders. So what we did was by a combination of automating things and integrating systems and just coming up with better processes, I was able to get it where 2 people could do that in about half a day. And the result based on the average is That saved us about $108,000 in labor. Now, I didn't fire them, but what happens is it allowed me to redirect those buyers into projects that had a better chance of adding value and reducing costs, rather than have them sitting there doing clerical work. So that was an opportunity cost just by changing that. That saved us $108,000 of labor to things that actually had a better chance of adding margin and profit to the bottom line. And profit leverage effect. This one is really huge. That same business, they considered sales, improvement. Every month we came back and they were looking for sales. They considered one sale per store per quarter to be a target they wanted to hit for sales. So 75 extra sales per quarter, and they considered that to be a sales success. And this was an average of about $330 per sale. So what I did was, I wanted to measure. When I thought, well, measure relentlessly, I wanted to understand the impact of what I had. And so, I took a look at, okay, out of that 300 average sale, $330, what did we make? And it came out after everything was all done, all soft and hard costs were out, we made $82 a sale, free and clear. And so what I started to do, they were looking at 300, so 75 sales per quarter is 300 per year, 300 sales per quarter, per year at $82, comes up to $24,600 worth of increased revenue to the company. That was the contribution, 300 sales, and all the people that had to touch it, the salespeople, the lab techs, the distribution people, everybody, the suppliers, it made us, 300 sales made us an extra $24,600 in profit. What I looked at though is when I consolidated polarized lenses as an example, because we were buying from all over the map, I consolidated one supplier. And my first year, I saved $117,000 on polarized lenses. And so what I did, $117,000 savings on a company that was doing 70 million a year. It's nice, and the CFO is not going to be unhappy, but it's not doesn't sound like a big deal. But what I did was when you take the 117 and you divide it by 82, which is what we make on every sale, it was the equivalent of 1,426 sales. So just by making a good supply chain decision that gave us a better price on a product, that gave us supply assurance to make sure we had the right products in all the stores to be able to give it to that customer when they wanted it, it was the equivalent of 1,426 sales versus all the work and everything they had to do to make 24,000 by doing 300. That's the impact the supply chain can have on your bottom line. That's how it makes you more competitive in your environment. But you need to take steps to create that structure that allows you to start to get some of these kind of results within your own organization. And the last thing, and this is back to results, this is one of the places that I used to work for. On the left is a picture of what the warehouse was, what it looked like, and it had stuff kind of everywhere. And after I'd done the optimization and I got rid of the clutter and reorganized it, the picture on the right is what the warehouse looked like after the fact. And this is the same warehouse just from the other direction, and that, but you can see it's much better organized and set up. But what we did was we got rid of the clutter. We got rid of the things that weren't selling. We got rid of the things that were just there that we counted 10 years in a row that weren't going anywhere. We sold them or we did something to move, we refurbished them to use them as something else. But the idea is recover as much as we can, but it was about just having what you need to do business and make sure that you handle that core business and make sure you go from there. And it reduced our exposure, in this in terms of inventory and obsolescence as well. I just want to make this mention, and we have John from the Alberta Institute here as well, and we also have Nicole. She wasn't able to make it from Saskatchewan, but we do offer, from that in terms of how we can help. We do offer customized in-house or virtual training based on your needs. It's demand-led training on basically what you feel your needs are. Some things we've done in the past, in the last year or so have been negotiation, problem-solving, decision-making, contract management. We did some contracting for IT, and we've done inventory optimization. So these are some things, and these are just examples, but again, it's demand-led. It's whatever your demand or whatever your need is, and training can be developed to satisfy an immediate need to meet a problem that you have now, so that you take the training and then your people can be doing it the following morning and receiving value for it the next day. and that's the focus. And we're available, if this is something you guys want to take a look at, we're more than happy to, chat with you about how we might be able to help you out and make you more competitive and more profitable. And
Awesome.
there's my
I'm back.
contact info.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rick. That was wonderful and a lot of information at once. And we just want to remind everybody that below you can see, and there's a chat function. You can put your message in there, and Erin and I are monitoring it. So we did have a few questions during the chat, and I actually wrote down a few questions I had. So I'm not sure if it's Rick or John that'll answer, but the first one is really about, well, we should also let everyone know that Rick will be back with us on December 1st doing a session on inventory optimization, which he just mentioned and showed those fabulous pictures of. So I'm really excited about that one. We'll also be supplying his information to everybody via email along with the recording of this. So the first question I have is, what do you think are some of the most common supply chain issues an organization faces?
I kind of mentioned them, but it's really about understanding demand. It's understanding what to buy and when to buy it, and probably how much to buy.
Okay.
That's probably the hardest one, and it really comes back into not understanding the true demand of your customers enough.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't dig into it, it lets you kind of doing a little bit of the, I guess it's this or I think it's that, and that's where you can get into trouble. So that would be one of them. Another one is just focusing too much on the price and not enough on the total value of what you're doing. Because sometimes paying a little more is better for the value that you receive rather than focusing just on what's the lowest price.
Okay, that's great. And further to that, you talk about making significant changes, and you gave some really great examples in terms of money and I think, but how long does it take to make a significant change in one supply chain? Is it based on the business size, or can one of our members, if they were interested, say like they could expect to see, change over a certain amount of time if certain actions were taken?
It does depend a little bit on the organization, on volumes. Sometimes it depends on senior management, whether or not they're committed to it.
Yeah.
But I find that generally what I find there is a lot of low hanging fruit that you can deliver right away within the first 2 years. And it extends to that. And then from once you get to 2 years, you really get the easy stuff out of the way and you build the systems. And then the challenge becomes, then you need to really start focusing on some more fundamental changes to processes that are bigger.
Okay.
The CFOs and presidents, they like the stuff when you can come in and find those immediate savings where you consolidate and you optimize your inventory and you find those efficiencies on how goods move, and they really like that. And it's kind of ironic because it requires their people to change and they like to get the results. But after about 2 years, you run out of that low hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
That's right there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden to go further is all of a sudden they need to change. And sometimes
Right.
that's not the easiest one, but I'd say that it could be immediate. Depends. Like I remember when I started with Arnie's Welding is a company that builds low bed trailers for moving heavy equipment and end dumps for moving gravel, asphalt, that kind of thing. And in 8 months, the first 8 months that I started there, this is in 2008-9 when that last recession hit. I saved the organization just under $400,000 just in 8 months. So, and that a lot of that had to do with an industry where we use lots of steel. So it really comes down to, do you have an understanding of how your business are, where the costs are? Can you make it visible and do that? The better you can make it visible and understand where the cost drivers are,
Mm-hmm.
you can see results as early as a few weeks if you jump on it.
So one of the things you mentioned was talking about market intelligence. And so I guess the question's kind of been phrased as like, where do you go find your market intelligence? What is the common places to look? And when do you start paying for market intelligence, or who do you pay for market intelligence from?
Well, I generally don't. I've never paid for it. I've always been one that in my roles, I spend a lot of time. Well, the golden rule of supply chain, you can't solve it all from sitting behind your desk. There's
Okay.
times when you have to close the door and sit in front of a spreadsheet, but But I find that where the opportunities really come from is to get out and build relationships.
Mhm.
So it's going out and, walking the floor or walking the yard and and looking at what your people are doing and saying, geez, that looks awkward. And go ask them like how, what that looks awkward. They'll say yeah or no, whatever it is. But then just, if you could change it, what would you do? And say,
Mhm.
why would I do this, this, and this? And why would you do it that way? Because it allows me to get this, this, and this. And what that does, it starts to give you that continuous improvement kind of scenario. The other thing though, that's just within your four walls. Like go out and talk to the people doing the work because they generally know the best way to do it or what needs to change to make it better.
Mhm.
The other thing is go on facility tours as often as possible. Like go to your suppliers, go to those key suppliers, go walk the floor, bring somebody, you know, go look and see what they're doing. Because I can't tell you how many times that I've seen things that a supplier is capable of that I wasn't even aware of that he wouldn't have learned if I actually hadn't have gone. And the
Mhm.
same with your customers. Go to see what's going on with your customers, whether it be contractors or even somebody doing. Go see what's going on, talk to them, and find out, what you did well and what you didn't. And that goes into how do you structure your supply chain differently to be able to find those things that increase value for them, reduce costs, and ultimately make you more competitive and profitable.
Oh, that's a really great point. So that's actually brings one of the next questions we had, which was about relationships with suppliers, with so many entrenched relationships. Is it a good part when you do a corporate strategy to really reevaluate or reassess or look at how you have your relationships with some suppliers when maybe you've been using the same supplier for years and years and years,
Yeah.
that it is to your advantage?
It's you have to look at everybody, even if you have a great relationship and that person comes out and you've been doing there. And I'm not saying that it's easy, because if you've got a great relationship with somebody and they've been there for years, but if their organization can't provide your need, if you're having to either pay more or live with, supply shortages, or you're having to live with delays, or if they can't help you get from current state to what you need,
Mm.
then you do need to look at that. But relationships, you also need to manage it and understand that you always need to have plan B too. Because, and you chuckle, but there's a lot of people that don't. Oh,
Yeah.
they'll look after me. Oh, they'll always be there. But as soon as they don't, and you're in that pickle, if you haven't talked to somebody about how do you integrate them in,
Hmm.
how do you check that? How do you make sure that they're in a position where you have plan B?
Yeah.
Uh, because your main guy, they have a fire, or in this current environment, all of a sudden they have an outbreak of COVID where they get shut down.
Yeah.
That's the only place you're getting it. How do you go chase it? So you need to have relationships everywhere, and you need to be good at building those relationships, but also manage the expectations that you have
Hmm.
with them, so that even if you have to go a different direction, you don't burn the bridge.
Yeah. I did have one question from somebody who they just wanted to say, did they hear correctly that you said that manufacturers are facing a new tax related to wastage? Was that correct, or was that an example you were giving?
So it's something that I foresee, and based on the
Okay.
scuttlebutt and word on the street, it's something I believe is going to happen. Like the carbon tax has already come down,
Hmm.
and like Ontario has their stewardship program.
Hmm.
Um, what I think you're going to start to see is, and up north, if you do business up north, you look what happens when they have unused stuff. It just gets dumped outside of town. And
Yeah.
I had it when I was working for the mines up in Flin Flon. Our issue was the government came to us. We owned a railway, and we replaced the ties. They were soaked in creosote, and what they would do is they put the new ones in, they take the old ones, they go put them in a big pile. But the problem is, it started to seep,
Right.
and we were on the hook. They said you need to clean it up and you need to reclimate this, and so there was significant cost to that.
Hmm.
What I'm saying is that what's going to happen is I can see the governments in their I can see, and again, this is just from people talking, it's not there yet, but I can see governments deciding that, you know what, we're going to start, taxing you for, more than tippage fees going into landfills. We're going to tax you for putting plastics in your packaging that can't be recycled or is bad for the
Right.
environment. And so what's going to be is it's going to have to change. How do you take a look at what am I buying? That again, one of the other organizations we changed our packaging because of exactly that.
Hmm.
Is that they changed the tax regime, the duty regime on the type of plastic we're using for bubble packaging, So we changed to something else because they were going to charge us more for using what we were doing.
Okay.
So those things they're going to start to come because government's taxing people is going to be kind of hard, and they're going to look for ways that public in general are going to accept. And right now, taxing garbage is, especially with this younger generation, is acceptable to them.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have, and we're hitting our time perfectly. So I just want to thank you so much, Rick. And I know, John, you were there, and I know you didn't get any questions, but John is also in the Alberta offices. As I mentioned, I'm going to provide everybody with a recording. Hi, John. There you are. And we're going to provide a recording, and we're also going to provide you with a link to talk to Rick if you have more questions about this and you want to go in depth. They'll also be sending you out a quick post-webinar survey from the Supply Chain Canada website. And again, Rick will be back with us to talk really in more detail. I'm more excited about where you're going to go take photographs in the city with, and maybe if we have a member who'd like in the city of Winnipeg or Manitoba would like to volunteer to be a guinea pig for inventory optimization, we can keep it confidential, but we can use you as an example and provide suggestions. But if not, let Erin and I know if that's something any of our members would be game to try. But that'll be on December 1st. So again, thank you so much. Thank you both of you for coming, and we'll talk to you soon.
There's just one more thing, if I could just throw one more tidbit in.
Go ahead.
We're going to send out a survey, something that if you're interested, we are looking to do some roundtables, on supply chain issues and specifics, and we're trying to, it's not a pitch or anything. We're trying to get information and understand the challenges that you guys are dealing with right now, and maybe some of the creative things that you're doing in terms of best practices. And so that we will send a request out to see who might be interested in participating. And I encourage you to do so because they usually go over pretty well. So
that's wonderful. It's a great opportunity for our members to participate and really provide some input for this issue.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.